So these Zoom rooms will be recorded. So if for some reason you miss or need to go back and get something, you certainly can check it out. It will be in the folder that you've already received a link to on YouTube for the environmental ethics class. Um, a little bit of paperwork stuff before, and so the first couple days, we're just going to go through the different ethical theories. So, Rowan, this is going to be old hat for you. Repeat, but anyway, because you got to understand the ethical theories in order to, know what to apply. So that's what we'll do for the first several days. I gave us 4 days on the syllabus. Might be less than that, and I will try to upload the notes as well, so you'll have those as a hard copy, but there will be a recording. Just a couple things. Seeing how this course was originally supposed to be a study travel course to Australia, I've set it up that way. So your daily journals, that's why you're doing daily journals, because if you were doing an actual study travel course, you would have a daily journal that you would keep. So you'll just, each day, you have in the journal thing I sent you an itinerary, and you'll just write a journal and you only have to keep the journal for the days we're doing Zoom. So for the next 2 weeks, you don't have to keep doing the journal after we stop doing Zoom, and just follow the itinerary. It doesn't have to be anything profound or deep. Watch a video on YouTube about the area, or read one of the sections. There's some things to read or paintings to look at, and near the end there's an piano recital that's at the Sydney Opera House, and then you just write your sort of impressions, so that it's like a daily diary kind of thing. You'll upload that to Canvas on May 29th. You don't have to submit it each day, but I do want you to keep the journal each day for the next 2 weeks, but you'll upload it. So you'll have a few days after you finish to get it done or whatever, and you'll just upload it to Canvas to the appropriate section. Is that clear to everybody?
Absolutely.
Great. And you'll notice some days we're in the same location for like 2 days, like the first couple days we're in Sydney. So do the journal that way. So you'll do a journal entry for today in Sydney, and then tomorrow again in Sydney. It might not quite add up to the exact number of days that we're doing Zoom, but it will be a close approximation. The other thing, for the students that were going to go to Australia, this is basically the itinerary we were going to do. So you'll sort of follow along where we would have gone and the things we would have seen in Australia. So, it's the best we can do in the world we're in at the moment. But that's that. The response papers, hopefully you'll all get your textbook in time. I know it's been sort of slow. You'll definitely need it because, again, we're doing Zoom for like 10 days, and then you're sort of on your own for the next 4 weeks. So you need the textbook to read the sections that are assigned in there. You can rent it. You don't have to buy it. In fact, I wouldn't expect you were going to buy it unless you're going to be an ethicist. But the response papers will be to the articles that are in the textbook. And that's just 1 page. And so you'll read the articles, and then you'll notice I listed specific articles that you can write a response to. I don't want you to write a response to all the articles, just one of the options that I listed. So the only difference is the first response paper, there's only 1 article, so you'll just write a response to that 1 reading. But after that, there's 4 or 5 or 6 readings, and you can pick whichever one you want to write a response to. It's 1 page, and it's just sort of your reflection upon that reading. And you'll just upload it to Canvas. Make sure you do them because it's 30% of your grade. So The three ethical papers, those are basically all the information you should need to do those ethical papers will either be in the lecture notes I'm giving you, the textbook that you have, or the things that I've uploaded or will upload to Canvas, or the videos that are on YouTube. And so you're going to watch those videos. Um, Most of them are documentaries, so they're sort of feature length, 40, 45 minutes long. And then you're going to write a 3-page ethical analysis of the material that's in there. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this is some sort of question. Is kind of what I'm concerned about. Is this entire class just like 10 days? Because I did look at Canvas. Uh, there's a whole lot more assignments that are more than just 10 days. Is this technically like just 10 days of Australia and
No, so the way study travel is set up is that you actually go to a country for basically 2 weeks, okay? And what happened was the college decided when they canceled all the study travel courses, they decided initially to move the courses online, and they were going to offer them just to the students that had signed up for those study travel courses. And then they made a decision to open it up to any person on either the Athens or Demorest campus. However, they didn't change the format when they did that. So in the regular study travel, you would meet for uh, leading up to going to the country, you would meet, and then you would, after that, um, have some stuff that was due after you got back from the country. And so we're going to meet for the next 2 weeks sort of in the Zoom format, and then you're going to have these other assignments that will be due along the way, all the way up until June 19th. Because you don't get a grade, and the grades for this class are actually submitted earlier than the regular summer classes. So you won't get your grades will be submitted on the 26th. Does that answer your question?
I believe it does.
Yeah, so we're going to spend this time trying to orient you, get the groundwork for you, and then you're going to be on your own to do the research and the reading and stuff separate to that. Because that's really what would happen if they did the study travel. They would have either done coursework before we left to go to the country or after we got back from the country, as well as while we were in the country. And the school decided not to change that format when they opened this up. So that's where it is. Obviously, I'll be available. You can send me an email. You can obviously send me a Zoom invite if you want to talk about something. So I'm not gonna disappear. Next Friday, I'll still be around and still be available to answer questions. And you'll just upload the stuff to Canvas on the dates that it's due. I set it up so you can start uploading stuff the middle of next week. So you don't have to wait to upload stuff till the actual due date. If you work ahead, that's okay. Some things are set up so you can't really submit them ahead of time. Like the ethical analysis papers, those are set up so you can't really submit them ahead of time. But the other things are set so you can upload them. So if you want to sit down and read ahead of time, you're more than welcome to do that. But you all have till the 19th to get stuff turned in. All right, great. Any other? You have another question, Donald?
Nope, that's all the questions I have.
Great. So we're going to look at this today. There's lots of moral theories. Okay. That being said, there are a multiplicity of moral theories. Some are more common than others. We're going to look at some of the basic common moral theories. Probably many of them you use in your daily life, but you've never thought about it or realized that you use them. And so I'm going to list them. And Some of these we're only going to really talk about, just sort of getting your bearing straight. You're not going to use each of these in the papers you write or whatever, but I do want you to have a familiarity with them. So the seven that we're going to talk about for the next few days are consequentialism, natural law theory, Kantian moral theory, rights-based moral theory, virtue ethics, and divine command theory. We're not going to talk a lot about that one because it's pretty self-explanatory. And then social contract theory. And you'll notice that in your 3 ethical papers, if you look at the assignments, you have to employ one of these theories. So you have to employ either consequentialism or natural law or social contract theory. And so when you're crafting that paper, that's the moral theory you're going to use to argue your point. And I'll give you a little more. In fact, today or tomorrow, I'll upload an example paper so you'll see more or less how this works. But in your last paper, the one that's due on June 19th, that's also going to be your Gen Ed paper. All of you are getting Gen Ed credit for this. So you have to submit a paper to a writing sample to Gen Ed. So that will be submitted, and you have to email that to Gen Ed. So you upload it to Canvas, but you have to email it to Gen Ed. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But just so you know that, and that's how the Gen Ed committee assesses whether I've taught you anything or not, and more importantly, whether you learned anything. So everybody will upload that to the Gen Ed. Your grade is not dependent on what the Gen Ed committee decides. If they think you learned something or didn't, your grade isn't, that's my decision and based on the grades that you earn, but you know, that's just how they assess it. So we'll look this morning or this afternoon at consequentialism. We may get to natural law theory, but we'll definitely look at consequentialism. And so consequentialism is broken up into several subcategories, and we'll look at the general category of consequentialism first and then the subcategories. So in thinking about moral issues, one obvious thing to do is to consider the consequences or effects of various actions. The consequences or effects on matters that are of concern to us. So when you have a choice to do something in life, not a choice like to get up or not get up or go to class or don't go to class, but something that's significant, there are going to be consequences to the choices you make. And you might decide to do one thing as opposed to another thing based on the consequences. And that's what we're talking about in consequentialism. So the moral theory consequentialism is one where the consequences of the actions are all that matter in determining the rightness or wrongness of the action. So this is basically a foundational moral theory, and whether something is right or wrong is really determined on the consequences. And so in this case, if I decide to shoot someone and that person dies, it's going to be either right or wrong based on not simply possibly whether they died or not, but why I chose to shoot the person. Say they were a criminal and they were trying to hurt someone else, and I killed a person in protecting those other people that person was trying to hurt. In that sense, the consequences of my actions would be deemed morally good because I killed someone that was trying to hurt other people. Now, if I simply walk up and shoot someone and they die, I've done the exact same thing as the first example. The difference is that person wasn't doing anything to harm anybody else, or they were just simply minding their own business. In that example, the consequences of my action are immoral because I killed someone for no reason whatsoever.
That's committing murder.
Right. And therefore that would Now, one thing, thanks, Donald, for pointing that out. We need to be mindful that legal things and moral things are not always the same thing. So something can be moral and illegal, and something can be legal and immoral. So it's not always a one for one when we're talking about law and ethics. But in that example, it is. I just killed someone. It's an illegal act. It's also an immoral act. All right. Everybody with me so far? Okay, great. So going a little further on this, right action is to be understood entirely in terms of the overall intrinsic value. Now, have you ever heard the word intrinsic before? Does anybody know what that means?
No clue.
Okay.
Basically, intrinsics is the inner values that you appreciate, what you like doing the most.
Yep. So something that has intrinsic value has value for its own sake. Okay. So there's human beings have intrinsic value. For example, we are valued simply because we exist. Money, on the other hand, has extrinsic value, meaning that the value of it is placed on it externally. So money doesn't have value unless we decide it has value.
Intrinsic and
In,
extrinsic are usually two sides of the same coin, are they?
so intrinsic is internal and extrinsic is external. That's a good way to look at it. So something with intrinsic value has value in it for its own sake, and extrinsic, we put value on it. So when we're looking at consequentialism, the consequences of an action compared to the overall intrinsic value of the consequences associated with some kind of alternative action. And so this is where the consequentialism isn't just an A, B sort of scenario. I can have two choices. Go back to the example of the criminal that's going to hurt someone else. I can kill that person, and that may be a moral good by killing that person. Or I could arrest the person, which would also prevent them from hurting someone else.
Which is usually a police officer's job.
Right. It's more, in this scenario, there's more good in me arresting the person than killing the person. Because I valued the person's life by not killing them, but I protected the lives of other people by arresting that person. So consequentialism looks at that kind of when you have choices. It's not merely just the choice to do this or that. It's also how much intrinsic good will come from it. And presumably there would be a higher level of intrinsic good to arrest the person than to kill the person. Now that may not always be the case, but I'm just pointing that that's part of how we're going to analyze this. Okay. We've looked at the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic. All right. All right. So now there's 5 things about consequentialism that you need to understand. All right. The first one. First, consequentialist moral theory is values based. It characterizes or defines right action in terms of intrinsic value. So that's the first thing. Number 2, and I'll go back over these in a minute, but I just want to give them to you. Number 2, this sort of theory involves the notion of alternative actions open to a person in circumstances calling for moral choice. A person is confronted by a range of alternatives, and any one of them you may choose to perform. But remember, the moral choice will be the one that has the most intrinsic good. 3, consequentialism is a comparative theory. of right action. The rightness or wrongness of an action depends on how much intrinsic value it will likely produce, compared to how much intrinsic value an alternative action will do if performed. 4, consequentialists account for right action is a maximizing concept. And what a maximizing concept means is we are to perform actions that will have higher or the greatest number, greatest good possible. So if you have two choices and both of them are going to have good outcomes, the one that will have the maximum amount of good outcome is the best choice. And then finally, consequentialism is strongly impartialist. So in the sense that rightness or wrongness of action is made to depend upon the values of the consequences for everyone, so who is affected by the action and is affected equally. So in this sense, you can't, one thing that would make an action immoral is if I did something that had better outcomes for me and less good outcomes for other people. Now, I might think I'm doing something that's good and moral, but in fact, what I'm doing is really doing something that benefits me more than it does other people. Um, and so in that sense, consequentialism is supposed to be impartial. If I do something good, it's supposed to be good for all people that are affected by the action. So back to the criminal that's about to kill injure people. If I arrest that person, I've done good for myself because I've prevented that person from possibly hurting me, but I've also done good for all those other people from preventing the criminal from hurting those other people. And so in that sense, the good I did benefited everybody equally. I didn't somehow get some additional benefit from it. Everybody with me so far?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So inside of consequentialism, there are some subcategories or sub-moral theories, if you will. And one of them is utilitarianism. And utilitarianism is based on if happiness or welfare are deemed to have the highest intrinsic good or value, that's utilitarianism. So in this model of what I'm talking about, and I'll unpack this more in a minute, this is a type of consequentialism. And in here, the utility or the value of happiness is the highest good. So things are moral if they bring about the highest good for the most amount of people. So anybody have an example of what might be a utilitarian sort of thing? Something that brings happiness or well-being for the most amount of people.
Um, maybe like probably a Christmas present of some sort.
Uh,
Because like, huh?
Christmas present doesn't have any intrinsic value because it's a gift that you put value on. So this has to be something that's going to bring maximum joy to the most amount of people affected. Okay.
Oh, okay.
The coronavirus found a cure.
Okay. Okay. Good. So if we can find
Good answer.
if we can find a vaccine or a cure for the coronavirus, it's true that some people may make money from that, right? Some pharmaceutical company may make money from that, but tens of millions, possibly billions of people will benefit by not getting sick from this virus anymore. And so that would be something that would be a utilitarian sort of good for society. It would benefit the people that are making the vaccine or the cure, but we're maximizing the goodness for a wide number of people. So it would be deemed morally good to do that. What would be something that would be the opposite, that would on the surface appear to be something that's good, but really is not good for maximum people in the end? Can you think of something sort of the counter to that? And obviously the virus is the counter, but the virus isn't moral because it doesn't have, remember, people have to make decisions. So the virus doesn't have the capacity to make decisions.
Maybe accidentally getting other people infected by COVID-19?
Well, or not accidentally. What if you intentionally infected other people
Oh,
with,
intentionally. Yeah.
if you intentionally infected other people to then create the cure to make money from them?
That would just be stupid.
Well, no, because it would benefit you, and the cure would help other people, but the you would be doing that to benefit yourself ultimately, or your investors, or your corporation. So in that kind of model, on the surface, it would seem like the people that were doing the good thing were helping society, but they were in effect creating the problem to benefit themselves.
Yeah. Well, that one person intentionally giving the COVID-19 to other people, they're probably just saying that they're doing the wrong thing for the right reason. It's still going to cause them to take a risk because that person did not use social distancing like they're supposed to. But but if they are trying to find a way to cure that some sort of stuff and make an example of it, I guess that's probably why the person had to do the wrong thing for his or her right reason.
Yeah, but that's why we have lab experiments, right? So that we don't, but it's true. You do have some responsibility in that. That's true. But I just want us to understand that sometimes things that seem moral could be immoral because of the ulterior motives. And so we have to look inside, especially when we're using utilitarianism, because utilitarianism is really looking at just a maximum benefit for people. And so it can be simplistic, but we also need to look at the deeper motives behind it. All right, let's look a little more closely at utilitarianism, just so and where it came from. So utilitarianism uh, was was introduced as a moral theory by the philosopher Jeremy Bentham. And Jeremy Bentham was an English philosopher who lived in the 1700s and early 1800s. And then John Stuart Mill was a student of Jeremy Bentham's, and he sort of continued putting forward this type of theory. And John Stuart Mill's really the one that developed the notion of the maximum welfare or happiness for all people as the sort of how you determine rightness or wrongness of an action. All right. There's two other types of. First, let's go a little bit deeper into the notion of utility here, because this is important for us to understand the term utility. Utility refers to the net value of the consequence of actions. The net,
It can also refer to as a tool for
yeah,
utility.
yes, but here it's the net value of these actions. And so the net value of an act's consequences refers to how much overall welfare or happiness would likely result from the action being taken. And there's both a short term and a long term. Uh, Most people, and the downfall with utilitarianism is people often do it from a short term goal. And so obviously, lots of people can be happy when the stock market goes up, right? Lots of people benefit from that. But if that's the only thing you're looking at is that short-term gain. You're not paying attention to the long-term outcome. And there could be negative consequences in 5, 10, 15, 20 years out. And those negative consequences could be much greater than the short-term goodness that happens in the stock market, for example. And therefore, it would make the long-term sort of consequences not positive. And so when you look at utilitarianism and you use it as a moral theory, it's important to look at both short-term and long-term. A perfect example, and this is environmental ethics, so a perfect example is plastic. Plastic was created in the 1950s as a way to create a container that would be cheap and light as opposed to glass, right? And that we could put food in and liquids and other kind of things. And eventually plastic became ubiquitous. It was everywhere. It was in every kind of packaging. It was in every kind of product. It was used, you hardly find glass containers anymore for anything. There still are some things. But, so there was a short-term benefit to plastic. It was cheaper than glass when it was created, and it had multiple uses, and it could be molded and all kinds of things much easier than glass could. So people thought, wow, this is awesome. But the process of making plastic also required that it be durable, right? Well, one of the problems with the durability of plastic is it doesn't break down in the environment. It takes like 500 years. And so now, 50 years, 70 years later, we have trillions of pieces of plastic all over the earth. And they don't go anywhere. They don't go away. They're difficult to recycle. They don't decompose. And so the long-term consequences of plastic in its use have been significantly negative for society. And so in that sense, if you looked at utilitarianism, people would say the utility of plastic in the beginning was high, but the utility after 70 years is really low because it's damaging the environment more than it's helping it at this point. Does that make sense to folks?
Yeah.
So when you're going through this course and you're looking at stuff and you're thinking about it, one of the things that you need to be mindful of when you look at ethics and morality is not just the sort of what's the effect going to be next week or next year or whatever, but what's the potential effect 10 years from down the road. Now, of course, we don't have crystal balls, so we don't know that for certain. And that's why ethics are sometimes difficult, because in the short term, many things seem really positive. This is also why we use other ethical models, and that's why we're going to look at different models, because in that natural law theory or social contract theory approach the same problem from a different lens. So one of the things you're going to discover in this class is that you can look at the same ethical issue from 2 or 3 different points. And in one point, it might seem like it's moral, but from another ethical position, it might seem like it's immoral, okay? And so that might be frustrating, but this is also why when people argue about things like the death penalty or abortion or gun control, any of those things have moral consequences and questions to them. And someone can analyze them from one moral position and say, it's immoral for a person to have an abortion. And someone else can use rights-based moral theory and say, well, the right of the mother has some moral component, and therefore abortion might be moral. And so sometimes you're looking at the same problem from 2 different moral perspectives, okay? So just keep that in mind. All right.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can Buddhism be utilitarian?
Yes. So in Buddhism, because Buddhism is looking at the ultimate outcome, uh, it can be a sort of utilitarian approach or philosophical or moral view. This is why Buddhists sometimes are less concerned about the environment than, say, someone else might be. It's not because they don't think the environment's important. It's because for them, enlightenment has a higher moral value than worrying about the environment, for example. Um, so, you know, um, and but I uploaded for you all, and it's in there. You have a Buddhist reflection on environmental ethics in the stuff that's on Canvas. So I encourage you to look at that if you're interested, because it's not all Buddhists wouldn't have the same approach. All right. Other questions?
So basically, what you're saying is all kinds of actions are based on different ways of thinking.
Well, every action has some sort of origin in a moral decision, okay? Aside from, whether I should have, uh, you know, Chick-fil-A or Taco Bell. We can just agree that both of those are immoral choices, okay? Right. No, see, you're supposed to laugh at that. But,
Oh,
but
but why would Chick-fil-A and Taco Bell be immoral choices?
they would, well, you could say that because fast food, the sort of larger implications of fast food may have bad effects for society, okay? So people get paid low wages, the way they source the foods, etc. So Chick-fil-A and Taco Bell might be bad things for society because fast food itself might be bad for society, okay? And you could analyze that from a moral perspective. I was making the joke that the decision to go to Taco Bell or Chick-fil-A isn't really a moral question, okay?
I got you.
Most decisions that we make, like that have substantive sort of consequences, are moral decisions. For example, the decision to get married seems like really one just based on love, okay? And whether you love the person or not. But there are moral consequences to marriage, whether you're going to have children, how you're going to raise those children, how you're going to divide your resources, what kind of marriage you'll have. Will it be an open marriage? Will it be a closed marriage? An open marriage meaning will you have other partners aside from the person you're married to?
Will it even be a virtual marriage?
Well, right. But you see, those questions, you think marriage is just, well, it's about, I love that person, so I get married. But there's a lot of moral choices within the marriage itself that we make. And so, therefore, deciding to get married is a moral choice. So, so most of the things we do in life have some kind of moral outcome to them, some smaller than others. All right. Um, we're not going to really look at these other types of consequentialism, but I want to mention them just so you have them. And the other two types of consequentialism besides utilitarianism are perfectionism and rule consequentialism. Um, and, and perfectionism, I'll, I'll talk about these so you understand them. Perfectionism is sort of a values-based sort of uh, consequentialism here. And how it works, value perfectionist states that human perfection, including knowledge and achievement, have intrinsic value. One might come to have a great deal of knowledge and an achievement in one's life and yet not be happy. So a perfectionist theory of good is not the same as happiness theory of good. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So here's an example. An action is right if and only if likely bring about a greater net balance of perfectionist good than would another alternative. And so, thanks for bringing us goldfish.
Goldfish.
That's perfect.
I'm
So,
usually a Doritos kind of guy, so.
I'm really hungry.
so perfectionist consequentialism is really based on human knowledge and human achievement. And so someone employing that kind of consequentialism would say that the greatest value is high human knowledge or high human achievement. And that's how you would value things. Rule consequentialism, on the other hand, is the view that the rightness or wrongness of an action depends on whether it is required, permitted, or prohibited by the rule, whose consequence is the best. And so rule consequentialism is really driven by a set of rules. And if the rule allows it, then it would be a positive good. Or if it prohibits it, it would be a negative good. Uh, and so examples of this rule consequentialism are rules that are around lying or stealing or killing. And so if you create sort of rules around those things, and then you employ rule consequentialism to determine the rightness or wrongness of something. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Great. All right. So I'm going to leave it there and open it up for any questions, and we'll look at natural law and a couple of the other okay. So the assignment for today is to just do your journal. That's the only assignment you have for today. This is being recorded, so I will upload to YouTube for you, and I will upload the notes as to Canvas, so you'll have them as well. But for today, all you have to do is look at the first day of Sydney, Australia, and then write a journal entry. The journal entries are all to be submitted on the 29th of May. So you don't have to submit them each day. Just type something up, keep it in a little, in a little file, and then upload all of them on the 29th of May to Canvas in one document. So you can just write as a Word document and sort of, but do date it. So May 11th, May 12th, May 13th, so I know the dates of it.
Would text entry also count?
What's that?
Would text entry also count?
What do you mean text entry?
Because like when you click the green button that says submit assignment, it'll give you not just a choice, but to not just to upload a file, but it also has another tab that says text entry. Is that allowed?
No, do either PDF or a Word document.
Okay, I was just double checking.
Yeah, just do a PDF or a Word document, okay? All right, if you have no questions, we'll meet again tomorrow. And thank you all and have a great afternoon. Thanks for bringing the goldfish, Ron.